Chapter 5 The Hill Across the Road.
The Saturday morning sun had barely glimpsed over the distant Sierra Nevada when a large truck rumbling by the Dunn home hauled Bo from slumber and dumped him much too early into a new, uncertain day. He rolled away from the window at the scent of diesel fuel and glanced at Ty, an unmoving lump in the middle of his bed. Must be good to be him, thought Bo. Noises don't ruin the deaf kid's sleep. Bo knew better, of course. Deafness came with precious few benefits. Ty didn't get much acknowledgement from the kids who froze him out at school, although his new implant did attract occasional curious stares. And he certainly hadn't gotten props from Bo lately, an older brother who mostly lived his own life and ignored him. Truth be told, Ty had started ignoring Bo as well. It had gotten to that point. It's amazing how two people can sleep in the same bedroom for years and still manage to avoid each other. But now the brothers had this vision thing going on, and it was Bo's first thought as he woke up. He strained to look out the window, but his sheets dragged him back to the mattress, not ready to let go. He closed his eyes. I can do this, Bo thought. I'll will myself back to sleep. It was no use. He was wide awake and the adrenaline was flowing. He sat up, wiped the night's drool from his cheek, and gazed at the neighborhood as it hatched in the early light. And he waited for Ty to wake up. Bo's eyes finally rested on the hill across the road south of his house. As hills go, it wasn't much. It was cone-shaped, about 10 stories high, and covered with wild grass and weeds that waved in the morning breeze. There were a few trees and shrubs around the bottom on the far side, but it was mostly bald. When Bo and Ty were younger, their mother would take them up the hill. They had pirate buried treasure birthday parties, stargazing trips, and lots of fun hikes. But over the past few years, it had become less interesting. It seemed smaller and its specialness had faded, and the adventures became memories. Bo reset his mind to today as the aroma of breakfast bacon oozed under the bedroom door. The day was already headed a different direction than he'd intended. He had planned to eat and do chores early and then go to Jesse's house. But now he was more interested in digging into yesterday's shark episode. He wanted to figure out if it had anything to do with what he and Ty had discussed in the SUV on the way to the beach. He had to know if his visions were like Ty's. Knowing that might help him figure out if they meant anything. "So how's your back?" Ty asked, startling Bo. He was suddenly sitting up in bed with his implant locked and loaded. Bo pulled up his T-shirt to show him the massive bruise. Ty quickly snapped a picture, spurring Bo to quickly yank his shirt back down. This wasn't what they needed to be doing. "And your front?" "Forget my body, dude, okay," said Bo. "What in the crud happened out there when we saw the shark? You saw it the same time I did. How did you know it was there?" "It was like somebody pointed my head right at the shark and told me to stare hard," said Ty. "I couldn't turn my head away if I wanted to. I was supposed to see it." There must be more to it," said Bo, even though the exact same thing had happened to him. "Anybody could have seen that shark. Why us?" "I don't know, but it felt right," said Ty. "It felt like it was our thing to do." Then an idea spread across Ty's face. "Hey, why don't you tell me one of your visions?" he suggested, swinging his legs over the side of his bed. "You asked on the way home if the shark had anything to do with our dreams. So tell me what yours are like. You don't have to sign. I can listen good and read your lips." This is where Bo had wanted to get sooner or later, so he nodded his approval. He lay back down, plopped his hands behind his head, and spoke without signing. "Okay, there was this one about 2 months ago." "I can't see your mouth," interrupted Ty. Bo climbed onto his left elbow and glared at his brother. Then he sighed, sat up all the way, and continued. "This vision happened before I got the bag. It started out like any other dream, he said. And then it wasn't a dream at all. It was like I was awake and I could touch and feel and smell things like they were real. And I mean really real life. Except my stomach didn't hurt. I loved that place. Bo paused as he remembered those few moments without pain. I was at a skateboard park, but nobody else was there. I saw a skateboard sitting at the bottom of one of the ramps. I ran down and jumped on it and started pushing myself along. It took a few minutes to get used to because it's not anything I'd done before. But I finally did it right there in my vision. I rode down and up the hills, and I even jumped a rail once. And when I fell, I got right back up. No fear, no pain, nobody watching, no embarrassment. After doing that for a while, I stopped to rest, and I noticed a little boy who had showed up with his own skateboard. He tried and tried to move on that thing, but it kept sliding out from under him. I watched him for a couple of minutes and felt sorry for him. Finally, I asked if he wanted help. He was embarrassed, but he said yes. So I helped him stand up on the board and showed him how to keep his balance and push himself along. It was cool, but weird, you know? I mean, 10 minutes earlier, I couldn't stand up on a skateboard. As we went around a curve, I saw my skateboard rolling toward me like someone had pushed it my direction. I jumped on it and told the little boy to go along with me. He did. So I learned how, then I taught him, then I showed him, then we rode our skateboards side by side. And he was so happy. And then I woke up. Way cool, said Ty. The next day at school, I felt braver, Bo said, recalling his comment from yesterday. And that's the day I asked Jessie's sister if she wanted to eat lunch with me. Did she say yes? Asked Ty. Nah, but it didn't matter. I asked her, and that was the important thing. Besides, I'm over at Jessie's house all the time anyway. She can't get away from me. Not that she wants to. Ty threw his pillow at Bo, thinking Bo wanted to play, that their relationship was thawing, that Bo was interested in him. Instead, Bo brushed the pillow aside like a lion swatting a fly casually. As it fell to the floor, he remembered one other thing. When I got home from school that afternoon, Mom told me to go out to the garage and look through some old stuff the Monteros had left when they moved out. She said she was going to throw away anything I didn't want. One of those things was a skateboard. I took it out to the street and that's when I saw you out the window, said Ty. I knew you didn't know how to ride a skateboard, but you were going very good. I wondered where you learned how. Bo got goosebumps. He hadn't thought about this vision for a while, and he'd certainly never told it to anyone. He was amazed he could still remember the details, and that something he'd learned while he was asleep had played out in real life. My doing dreams is kind of like yours, said Ty, not wasting a second. Doing dreams. So that's what Ty called his visions. Bo guessed he could get into that. I was almost asleep, continued Ty, when suddenly it was like I was all the way awake again. At first it was making me mad because I was so tired and I was going to the hospital very early the next morning to get my cochlear implant. That's when you had your first doing dream? Bo asked, surprised. Yep, pretty soon though, I just felt peaceful. And then I saw a boy riding a bicycle in front of our house. He was riding very good and popping wheelies. And then I noticed it was me on the bike. Ty sniffed, paused, and looked away. Bo remembered his mom explaining that some deaf people had problems with their balance because their inner ears were messed up. The same thing that caused them to be deaf also affected their balance. This was true of Ty. He could barely jump, not even a little, without falling down. Because of that, he'd given up trying to ride a bicycle long ago. I pedaled up the street and down around our court and back to our house. When I got to our driveway, there was a little girl sitting on the sidewalk. She had no legs and she was sad. And I was so sad for her. I could tell she wanted to ride, but she couldn't do it alone. So I stopped and balanced a bike against my legs, and I lifted her up and sat her on the seat. She grabbed the handlebars hard and looked at me with a huge smile on her face. So I began to push her on the bike. We went slow at first, but then we got going faster and faster. And then she put her hands into air like she was on a roller coaster. And she scared me really bad because I thought she was going to fall off. Then we was back to the spot where I found her, and her mom drove up. She lifted a little girl off the bike and thanked me in sign language for helping her. Then she put her in the car and they drove away. The girl looked out the window and waved at me the whole time. And then I woke up and it was time to go to the hospital. So that explains it, Bo said. What? Asked Ty. Look, remember how Dad bought you a bike the day before your surgery? And he promised if you'd work really hard with your cochlear, he'd help you learn how to ride? And then, the first time I tried it after my operation, I didn't need no help, Ty said. Now Bo knew. Ty's visions were like his. This is so cool, said Ty. Do you think we should tell Mom and Dad? Bo felt his brother's excitement. Just for a moment, he was younger. Back when he and Ty did things together and shared every thought that sprang into their heads with each other and with their parents. Then he caught himself. Any little new thing caused his mom and dad major stress these days. Bo didn't want to go there. A pounding on the door made him jump. It was his mother. I've let you guys sleep in long enough. We need to get started on chores before your sisters get here. Take the sheets off your beds and throw them and your pillowcases out in the hall. After Bo heard his mother's footsteps fade, he said, Let's wait until we know more. We don't need to worry them with this yet. We do need to find another place to talk, though. Let's try the garage. He didn't want to let it go. Not yet. Ty agreed. The boys got dressed, ripped the sheets off their beds, and headed downstairs. They didn't get far, though, before Abby called Ty back to finish the job, as his lower sheet and pillowcase weren't in the pile. Hurry, said Bo as he continued down. He stepped over 3 piles of dirty clothes in the tiny laundry room and opened the back door to the garage. And there was his dad, stacking beach items from yesterday's trip. Blake looked over at his son. Hey, you made it through the night, said Blake. He chuckled at his touch of sarcasm that was, as usual, off the mark. How are you feeling this morning? Okay, not as bad as last night, said Bo. He waited for his dad to dig deeper, but Blake simply smiled, nodded, and returned to his task. Bo couldn't stand the silence, and Ty wasn't down yet. So he asked his father, Do you think I'll ever get used to the bag, to having it forever? Blake looked down and thought for a moment. Have we ever explained what was going on around you during your first day at Children's Hospital, right after you were born? All Bo had wanted was a little white lie and a pat on the back, not a lecture. But his father couldn't help himself. He was one of those really smart people who thought deep about everything and didn't realize he hadn't taken you along for the whole ride before bringing you into the conversation. You've told me a lot about my first surgery, said Bo, but not much about the hospital. Well, your question makes me think it's time I did, said Blake. Wow, thought Bo, he's opening up. Your mother and I felt a couple of things were pretty sacred, so we never shared them. One was really hard on us, but it changed our perspective on your problem, made it easier to accept. Maybe it'll do the same for you. Blake explained that the hospital's intensive care unit for newborns had a special room for babies so sick they had no hope of survival. The parents of those infants would take turns holding them, waiting for them to die. Blake knew another had gone each time doctors and nurses burst down the hall and scrambled into the room. One of the nurses told him that on rare occasions, an infant would appear to die but then revive in its mother's arms. She said the nurses had a theory that some moms were able to will their children, love them enough to bring their souls back into their little bodies. Those mothers would never let the doctors remove their babies from their arms. I was stunned, said Blake. I told the nurse her theory was incredibly cruel, and I didn't believe a word of it. She explained that it wasn't a matter of worthiness or God playing favorites. It's just that they'd kept track of those few survivors over the years and discovered each one accomplished really important things no one else could. And their mothers seemed to play a unique role each time. Anyway, several babies died before you were a week old. As badly as I felt for their parents, it made me so grateful you were going to make it. And watching you yesterday at the beach, both playing and rescuing, well, I've never stopped being amazed at what you do given your trials. Bo was surprised his father had paid that much attention to him, and he was even more shocked he was letting him know. I'm so sorry things ended up the way they did, Blake continued. His eyes narrowed. But you are more than a bag, and remember, the bag is basically saving your life. I promise you'll get used to it. I think you'll even grow from it and become really grateful for it. Just be patient, conquer one challenge at a time. Don't try to live your whole life in one day. Neither Blake nor Bo said any more. But oh, how Bo wanted to. This was the kind of story and encouragement he could have used a lot sooner. He was glad his dad had shared, but he was mad it had taken a near-death experience to pry it out of him. As Blake finished, Ty joined them and immediately sensed the awkwardness. He suggested Bo go with him to the backyard. To keep from saying something he shouldn't, Bo agreed and walked out the side door with his brother, leaving Blake alone. Maybe in another 14 years, Dad'll tell me some other amazing secret, thought Bo. Are you all right? Asked Ty. Bo nodded. Yeah, I guess. He was still distracted. Tell me again why we wanted to come out here, he said. Ty stared at him. Oh yeah, doing dreams, said Bo. Refocusing, he looked around the tiny backyard. It was half concrete patio and half grass, and it was more echo chamber than hideout, surrounded as it was by a sound wall, 2 fences, and the house itself. Seemingly out of places to go for privacy, Bo and Ty slumped down on the back porch. As they lay on the warming concrete, the hill across the road loomed above them, enticing them. The brothers looked at each other. Without saying a word, they jumped to their feet, raced around the house, out of the cul-de-sac, across the street, and up the hill. It had been so long since he'd been there, Bo had forgotten how soft and full of holes the hill was. It was peppered with rodents who stayed inside during the day and came out to feed at night. He and Ty dodged the holes and didn't slow down until they neared the summit. Once there, Bo looked around. While it wasn't the tallest hill in town, it stood alone in their neighborhood, and it provided a 360-degree view of everything within a mile, and a perfect view of Mount Diablo, miles away to the west. Bo looked down at their house and suggested to Ty that they move just over the top of the hill to get out of sight of their parents' bedroom windows and deck. Ty agreed, and they went down the south side a few steps. Bo gazed down from his new perch and discovered that even though there were few trees and they were all near the bottom of the hill, they'd grown tall enough to create a barrier between the surrounding homes and their spot below the top. There, in plain sight of everything, not a person could see the Dunn boys. Since they hadn't brought anything to sit on, they found a couple of rocks, picked a spot, pulled the weeds, and carved out shallow places to sit in. Then they parked themselves in the dirt and got ready to share more visions. Okay, you go first this time, Bo said. Tell me about your next doing dream. I don't remember them in order, said Ty. Well, how many have you had? Asked Bo. A bunch. A few of them each week. How many have you had? Said Ty. Well, not that many, said Bo, more than a little jealous. Ty smiled and then gazed at the surrounding area, but said nothing. Look, said Bo, pick a doing dream and tell it. It's already getting warm up here. All right, let me think. Yeah, that's a good one. It was the night I got home from getting my implant put in. I had that huge bandage on the right side of my head and I was moaning all over the place. Mom gave me a pain pill and I finally fell asleep. And then Mom said I started rolling around. She said I was having a bad dream. She was almost right. When I fell asleep, I was sitting in a meadow with lots of pretty flowers that smelled really good, different butterflies and a few hummingbirds. And I heard a voice, which was weird because my cochlear wasn't turned on and my processor wasn't on my head. I heard it and I understood it. It was the best thing ever. You heard an actual voice? Asked Bo. What did it say? It said I should be more grateful. It said I should be more happier to my parents. And then it said you were having visions and I should ask you about them. It said I had a lot to learn and it would teach me, but that I needed your help. He paused. It said it needed 2 of us. Then it went away. But instead of waking up, I was still in a doing dream. Nothing was crazy or weird, just quiet at first. Then, after a few minutes, it started to get dark and cold and scary. I called out for the voice, but it didn't come back. So I panicked because I couldn't wake up and it wasn't there to help me. And I felt like something bad was getting around me, like Mom said was happening to her when we was inside her. I tried to run away, and that's when it started feeling like a regular dream again. And then the next thing I knew, Mom woke me up to see if I was all right. Bo sat with his mouth and eyes wide open. I just got chills, dude, he said, doing a lousy job of hiding his astonishment. Let me tell you about the vision I had that same night. I was at Jesse's so you could start your recovery without me giving you a hard time. Jesse and I had been hanging with his sister most of the evening. His mom finally stopped us when Jesse pulled out his BB gun. It wasn't that late, but she was so mad she said she didn't care how old we were. We were going to bed right then. It was barely dark, but I still went to sleep really fast. I'd gotten up early when you left for the hospital, so I guess I was tired. Right when I started to fall asleep, a vision started. I saw a huge lit-up stage and you were on it. And you weren't deaf. You had a part in a play and you were hearing and talking like everyone else. I remember telling myself this must be a regular dream because there was a lot of wishful thinking going on. But then I got this feeling in my gut, it was a good and warm feeling. I didn't hear a voice, but I knew what the feeling wanted me to understand. Bo paused, unable to go on. Tell me, said Ty. Okay, Bo gathered himself. It was saying I couldn't do it alone, that I needed you. And I felt it tell me I needed to help you more, which is hard for me because I'm your big brother. I'm not actually supposed to like you for another 8 or 9 years. Why didn't you say anything about this before? Asked Ty, slapping Bo on the arm with the back of his hand, angry. He raised his voice. You got almost the same message I did. I didn't know what to do with it, man, not until you brought it up, Bo said, defending himself. I thought I was hallucinating, and I wasn't going to tell you I was feeling voices. When you brought up your doing dreams in the SUV yesterday, it made me think it might be real. I was super relieved you told me. Fine, said Ty, relaxing a little, still ticked off and looking away. Fine, I get it. It took him another minute to calm down. He finally looked back at Bo. So then what happened? Then the stage lights dimmed and the good feeling went away. And then it got cold. I could barely see anything and I couldn't see you at all. I got so afraid. I climbed onto the stage and ran back and forth across it, calling your name. Then I saw you at the back of the auditorium when someone opened a door. You were wearing your old hearing aids, but you couldn't hear me. You turned and walked out of the room and I was left alone. I ran after you, but then Jesse shook me and woke me up. I'll bet you scared Jessie very much, like I did Mom, Ty said. Oh, yes, said Bo. It took a few minutes, but I finally calmed down. I couldn't go back to sleep, and I didn't dare. In the morning, Jessie's sister called us a couple of babies, and she asked who was having all the trouble during the night. I told her it was Jessie. Bo looked right at Ty. I panicked because I finally felt like you were making progress, and I could help you, okay? And then I lost sight of you, and then you left the auditorium, and I couldn't reach you. I didn't wig out because it was cold or dark or because I was scared, but because I was sad. Bo couldn't believe he'd let himself tell Ty that last part. He'd come to the hill wanting to see if the two of them were going through the same thing, not commune with his brother at a whole new level. Bo had to save face. Fast. He stood up. So, are you hungry? Bo asked. A little, said Ty, trying to get a handle on his emotions. He didn't look up. He was having a hard time dealing with what Bo had just shared. Bo continued. We blew off the bacon this morning, and I'll bet it's almost noon. Let's head back. In fact, why don't we go down the backside of the hill here? Looks like there's a path through those trees. They'd be a lot less visible going that direction, a plus from Bo's perspective. Ty agreed. After all, it wasn't like a forest or anything, just a few pine trees the builders had planted at the bottom of the hill years ago, with some shrubs and weeds mixed in. The boys charged down to the trees and started walking along the path they'd seen from above. Suddenly, with a warm day going on and a bright sun above, Bo felt a chill. Then, somehow, it seemed darker and he sensed danger, so he moved faster. But the quicker he walked, the colder and darker it became. Then it got worse. Bo heard branches rustle above him and pine cones hitting the ground, and he felt as if he was suddenly under attack from an unseen force. He clenched his fists, crouched as he walked, and looked repeatedly from side to side. But he couldn't see anyone. He could only feel the evil. Thankfully, the path was only about 50 feet long. Bo and Ty finally reached the sidewalk, and the bad feelings faded. Transfixed, Bo said nothing as he and Ty turned for home. But he was certain he knew those bad feelings. They were just like the ones his mother had described the night before. He turned to look at Ty, feeling sudden terror, and he yelled, "Mom!" But Ty was already running, and Bo had to sprint to keep up.
End of chapter.